Hey there folks, welcome back to Marvelous Anime. Today we're delving into a darker corner of anime history, a time where creators weren't holding back and OVAs came packed with body horror and stories that left a lasting mark on the genre. Long before today's psychological thrillers and edgy horror series, these vintage titles were already breaking the rules and pushing limits. This list includes 8 animes that continue to wow audiences, ranging from apocalyptic horrors to dark urban fantasies. Buckle up because this one's not for the faint of heart. Let's begin. Urotsuki Doji, Legend of the Overfeiend, 1987 to 2002. Originally adapted from Toshio Maeda's manga, Urotsuki Doji, Legend of the Overfeiend is infamous for pushing boundaries even by underground anime standards. It's cited as the origin point for tentacle rape. The anime blends extreme gore, explicit sexual content, and apocalyptic horror into something deliberately uncomfortable and disturbing. The story follows Amano Jiaku, a demon from the Makai realm who arrives in the human world in search of the Chojin, a powerful being prophesized to unite the human, demon, and man-beast worlds. Along with his companions, Amano's search leads him to a seemingly ordinary high schooler, Tatsuo Nagamo. But Nagamo's body begins to transform, and soon it's clear that he might be the reincarnation of the Overfeiend himself. The plot rapidly advances into violent and explicit chaos. When Nagamo awakens his powers, we're treated to a set of gory and ugly battles. As rival factions from the demon and beast realms intervene, the story descends into a war drenched in sexual violence, mutilation, and physical destruction. There's no attempt to tone things down because the violence is the point. Across multiple OVAs and films, the series dives deeper into apocalyptic horror. Humanity is torn apart, cities collapse, and the lines between worlds dissolve. The characters, too, are usually not granted agency. Instead, they serve as pawns or victims in a much grander nihilistic cycle. There's no real sense of resolution. Urotsuki Doji left a mark despite being banned in several countries and widely condemned for its content. Its influence shows up in later horror and dark fantasy anime, especially those exploring the fusion of eroticism and body horror. While it's hard to recommend without major warnings, this series undeniably reshaped what could be shown in anime and how far the creators were willing to go. Genocyber, 1994. Genocyber is a 5-part cyberpunk OVA that quickly earned a reputation for being one of the most graphically violent animes of the 90s. Released in 1994, it jumped right into the deep end of uncontrolled technological progress, human experimentation, and the downfall of society, with body horror and the usage of gore as its visual and storytelling medium. The story begins with 2 psychic sisters, Elaine and Diana, who are part of a secret government project aiming to create the ultimate biological weapon, which is the Genocyber. One sister is mute and appears emotionally distant, while the other is psychotically violent and deeply unstable. When their consciousnesses merge, the result is a monstrous entity of unimaginable power. Cities are wiped off the map in minutes, people are torn apart mid-sentence. Each episode follows the destructive ripple effects of the Genocyber's creation. In episode 2, a floating city meant to be a beacon of peace turns into a war zone after a child discovers the weapon buried within her body. In episode 3, a soldier haunted by guilt faces the horrors of war again when cybernetic experiments go wrong. By the latter episodes, society has fully collapsed and warlords rule remnants of civilization, and the line between human and machine is barely recognizable. Human flesh is fused with metal, heads explode without warning, and characters morph into biomechanical nightmares. The violence shapes the narrative, which drives the descent into chaos. The psychological torment is just as intense. Characters suffer from trauma, memory loss, and fractured identities, often losing touch with their sense of self. Genocyber challenges the idea of going too far with its graphic displays and with the lack of hope within it. It shows us a world in which human desire to possess power and to be in control at all costs can only be destructive. Genocyber gained cult status, although it wasn't commercially successful. It has a completely unreserved take on violence and nihilism, which influenced subsequent cyberpunk and horror anime that explored dystopia, identity loss, and technological horror. As such, it remains one of the most revolutionary and unsettling animes of its era. Violence Jack, 1986 to 1990. Set in a post-apocalyptic Kanto wrecked by a massive earthquake, Violence Jack is a 3-part OVA based on Go Nagai's manga. Released between 1986 and 1990, it drops us into a brutal wasteland full of gangs, cannibalism, and disturbing levels of violence. The one constant in all of this chaos? Violence Jack, a massive, mysterious figure who shows up out of nowhere and leaves only destruction behind. The episodes don't follow one big plot. Instead, Jack appears in different shattered corners of the world, sometimes saving people, sometimes just wrecking everything. In the first episode, Harlem Bomber, he jumps into a bloody turf war between two gangs. There's non-stop violence, beheadings, dismemberment, and sexual assault scenes that were shocking even for the time. It's Evil Town that really pushed things. This chapter focuses on 3 groups trapped underground after an earthquake, fighting over dwindling resources and power. One faction starts using women as bargaining chips, and when a deformed warlord takes over, everything spirals into complete sadism. Jack shows up again, not as a clear-cut hero, but more like a wild card, crushing the worst of them, though not before the damage is done. The final OVA, Hell's Wind, hits Jack against a biker gang led by a sadistic leader who mutilates and enslaves anyone in his path. The visuals are raw and relentless, which amplifies the sense of complete moral collapse in the wasteland. The anime explores social decay in extreme terms. There's no sense of order or any redemptive arc because it has themes of extreme violence and body horror tied directly to the idea that civilization is one disaster away from implosion. Psychological torment runs through the characters who witness and endure constant abuse, including Jack himself, who seems to carry the burden of judgment without fully belonging to either side. Violence Jack pushed the limits of what could be animated at the time. The depiction of sexual violence and anarchy led to bans in several countries. Although controversial, it left a mark in subsequent apocalyptic and exploitation anime, influencing many creators who wanted to explore the darkest depths of human nature as depicted when free of all social taboos. Wicked City, 1987. Directed by Yoshiaki Kawajiri and based on Hideyuki Kikuchi's novel, Wicked City is an urban fantasy thriller that mixes supernatural horror with violent eroticism. Released in 1987, it was known to include some fairly graphic scenes, an intense atmosphere, and a dark overlook on the coexistence of humans and demons. The movie is set in an alternate version of Tokyo where a hidden world of humans coexists with Black World, which is the dimension of supernatural creatures. There is a shaky peace agreement between the two worlds, which is dictated by a secret organization in order to avoid mayhem. Taki Renzaburo, a human agent, is called to guard an elderly and lecherous diplomat who's known as Giuseppe Mayart. This elderly pervert will play a key role in sealing the next treaty. Partnered with Makie, a mysterious woman from the Black World, Taki is pulled into a violent spiral of betrayal and bloodshed. Their mission is constantly under attack. Black World extremists are determined to stop the treaty at any cost, attacking with grotesque and sexualized violence. The well-known introduction, in which a woman turns into a spider-like demon in the middle of an intercourse session, really sets the tone. Bodies twist unnaturally, faces melt, and entire rooms are torn apart in seconds. The body horror is symbolic and iconic. As the film progresses, Taki and Makie are hunted across the city. Their encounters with the Black World's creatures reveal a world full of manipulation and psychosexual aggression. Makie, who's caught between her duty and her identity, becomes a central emotional thread. Her character reflects the deeper psychological torment of existing between two worlds and belonging fully to neither. The violence will echo with crossing boundaries, be it species, genders, or identities. The city has seeped into social decay, corruption exists both within the government and institutions. Wicked City seems like a horror movie about alienation and the boundaries of diplomacy when prejudice has deep roots, despite the fact that it's set in an urban environment. The film gained a cult following and influenced later dark fantasy and horror animes like Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust and Demon City Shinjuku, despite the controversies regarding its explicit content. Wicked City pushed boundaries with its mix of erotic horror and violent surrealism, proving that anime could be a medium for psychological and supernatural thrillers aimed squarely at adults. Perfect Blue, 1997. Perfect Blue opens with Mima Kirigwe, a pop idol at the peak of her fame, announcing that she's leaving her girl group Cham to pursue a career in acting. Her agency pushes her towards more mature roles and she accepts a small part in a crime drama. The decision alienates some fans, but Mima is determined to change her image. The shift isn't smooth, however. Her new role requires a graphic rape scene, which is obviously fictional, but still deeply traumatic for her. Around the same time, she discovers a website called Mima's Room, where someone documents her daily life in unnerving detail, thoughts she never voiced out, and places she didn't think anyone saw her in. As she reads more, Mima begins to lose her grip on what's real and what's not. People around her start dying. Her manager is attacked. A photographer from a risque shoot is murdered. The boundaries between Mima's role in the TV show and her real life start to blur. She sees visions of her former pop idol self, who's bright and cheerful, mocking her. Her reflection no longer matches her face. She collapses at home and wakes up on set, unable to tell what happened in between. Once the violence in Perfect Blue hits, it's sharp and personal. There's blood, yes, but the deeper horror is in how the violence reflects Mima's fractured mind. She questions everything: her choices, her past, her body. Everyone around her becomes a threat. Her stalker, a delusional man convinced the real Mima would never sell out, watches her every move and eventually attacks her, claiming that she's an imposter. What sets Perfect Blue apart is how tightly the psychological torment is tied to fame. Mima isn't being hunted by a demon or trapped in another world. Her breakdown comes from public scrutiny, exploitation, and the erasure of self that comes with celebrity. The film peels back the layers of her identity until even Mima doubts who she is. Director Satoshi Kon never plays it safe. The narrative and the editing jump through time and space without warning. Nothing is ever explained outright, and by the end, the viewer is just as unsure as Mima, and that's exactly the point. Released in 1997, Perfect Blue pushed psychological horror in anime into new territory. It influenced everything from Paranoia Agent to Black Swan, and remains one of the most disturbing explorations of identity and mental collapse ever animated. Angel Cop, 1989 to 94. In Japan's future, terrorist attacks are on the rise. To control the threat, the government forms a special task force with permission to kill on sight. Angel, one of the unit's top agents, is efficient and loyal. Her task is to kill enemies of the state. During an operation, the team discovers some strange murders where the terrorists are murdered before they're even approached. The bodies are ruined flawlessly, and no trace can be found. It's evident that there's a strange force at work. Soon, they discover that there are psychic assassins known as hunters who kill terrorists and government operatives. The hunters aren't working in isolation. A stronger plot then surfaces that the government is indulging in secret experiments and that they even use their own people to do it. Angel's unit is caught up unknowingly, cleaning up after these operations. Angel is then taken by those behind the experiments, and she's modified with cybernetic parts and turned into a weapon. When she returns, she's stronger but no longer fully human. The missions continue, but the line between enemy and ally blurs. When the violence increases, Angel finds out that the initial anti-terror operation of the government was just a cover. The aim was to control them, with the help of updated agents who impose political power. The Hunters were formed to prevent this, but they turned out to be equally extreme in their approach. By the end, the special unit is fractured, and Angel is left questioning everything. Angel Cop pushed the line with its mix of psychic gore and cybernetic mutilation. The raw depiction of violence and institutional rot made it stand out in the late 80s, paving the way for darker anime like Psycho-Pass and Elfen Lied. Devilman OVA, 1987 and 1990. There are two Devilman OVAs, The Birth from 1987 and The Demon Bird from 1990, and they adapt Go Nagai's classic manga with a focus on horror, destruction, and the clash between human cruelty and demonic power. The story centers on Akira Fudo, a mild, soft-spoken teenager. His life changes when his friend Ryo Asuka claims that demons are real and are planning to reclaim the Earth. Ryo's solution is that in order to defeat demons, one must become one. He brings Akira to an underground party, unleashes chaos, and forces Akira to merge with a demon named Amon. The transformation is violent. Akira survives the ritual as he gains powers while keeping his human heart. He becomes Devilman, which is part demon and part man, and begins hunting the creatures that are hiding among humans. His body is no longer his own. Wings, claws, and fangs erupt without warning. Fights are brutal and fast, and heads are torn off and bodies are split open. In the second OVA, Devilman faces Cyrene, who's a powerful demon with the body of a woman and giant wings. Her goal is revenge for Amon. What follows is a battle that levels entire landscapes because it's about the violence tied to identity and the cost of power. The OVAs never shy away from blood or suffering. The real horror is what happens between fights. The paranoia, isolation, or moral confusion. Akira tries to live a normal life, but he's stuck between worlds, hunted by both. These adaptations push the boundaries of late 80s anime by placing moral collapse and apocalyptic violence front and center. They helped shape the tone of future horror animes that focused less on monsters and more on what turns people into them. Biohunter, 1995. In Biohunter, a mysterious virus is spreading through Tokyo, which turns people into violent demons. The infected lose their humanity fast because once it takes over, there's no turning back. Two molecular biologists, Komada and Koshigaya, are trying to find a cure before the outbreak becomes uncontainable. Komada is already infected. Unlike others, he can control the transformation, at least for now. When he fights, his body mutates, and his skin starts to thicken and claws replace his hands. Each time he uses the virus to battle others like him, it pulls him closer to losing permanent control. The case that kicks the story into motion involves a psychic girl targeted by a high-ranking politician who's been infected. He's hiding the virus and using his power to silence anyone in his way. Komada steps in, using his altered form to protect her, but every fight with another mutant takes a toll on his body and mind. Koshigaya, his partner, sees what's happening but can't stop him. He continues working on a scientific solution while Komada heads further into violence. The contrast between them becomes very clear. One relies on logic, the other on power. The OVA moves fast. Bodies twist and tear, and fights end in seconds with blood everywhere. Biohunter focuses on people turning into monsters. The horror lies in watching someone try to stay good while becoming something built for destruction. Released in 1995, Biohunter didn't make a huge impact at the time, but its mix of science, horror, and moral decay makes it a strong entry in the wave of 90s anime that blurred the line between man and monster. Marvelous verdict! And there you have it. These older animes don't follow rules or try to please everyone. They showed violence, fear, and loss without flinching. A lot of what we see in newer horror and thriller anime was shaped by these raw, often overlooked titles. Whether it was political collapse, personal breakdowns, or the slow drift into madness, these stories left a mark. Hell, they still do, so be careful if you decide to seek them out. Unfortunately, that's all we got for you this time, but thanks for watching. If you're into anime that leaves you with more questions than answers, you'll want to stick around our channel. Until next time, stay curious and stay marvelous.